Hey guys, welcome back. So we're at this module where we get to deploy our application to Microsoft Azure. Now, Microsoft Azure is the flagship cloud provider by Microsoft. And what they do is they provide the ability to deploy your applications practically seamlessly to the internet. And they provide managed infrastructure. So you don't have to worry about going and configuring servers and setting up this and security that. They give you all of that practically out of the box. And it's relatively affordable. So we're going to be deploying our application, as you see it here, to Azure. Now, I have in another tab a link to Azure. You can get there azure.microsoft.com. And what they have, first thing that you're going to see is that you can get started for free. So it's really easy to sign up, especially if you already have a live account, which you probably used when you installed Visual Studio at the beginning of this course or in the past prior to this course. But it's easy for you to sign up, get started for free. You get 12 months as well as $200 credits to go towards services and experiments that you may want to. Now, personally, I have a pay-as-you-go account, which means that I only pay for resources used. So in this tutorial, some resources will not be free. As in, if you're on the free plan, that's fine. But if you already exhausted your trial period and then you're doing this course and you're deploying, then you may have to end up paying for certain services. But I will point them out as we go along, and I'll try to keep everything at the bare minimum. But if you can't necessarily follow along and do as I do, at least you'll see how it works deploying an application to Microsoft Azure. And it's pretty easy. So let's get started. Now, back in our project, we have some prep work to do in our configurations before we can think about deploying. In our app settings.json file, we need to configure a path. Well, we need to set up an SSL certificate and configure its path for our identity server. So what happens is that based on the configuration that identity server has out of the box, we need to configure an SSL certificate so that the client application can actually speak to the server application. All right, because then it's going to fail on the startup. So I actually had a little battle with this. So I'm just skipping ahead of the battle and I'm just showing you the solution to that very, very prevalent problem that you might end up having if you don't follow these steps, right? So the client application needs to communicate with our server with the identity service. It needs to basically do like a behind the scenes sign in so that, you know, the client knows, or the identity service knows that the client is here, it's ready to connect. This is done over a very secure connection. So an SSL certificate is necessary to facilitate this. So in development, that is fine, because in appsettings.development.json, you'll see here that it says the key type development. So it just says, okay, well, this is development mode, it's no problem. However, in our app settings, we don't have any setting like that. And we do have the client where it says this is the client that's connecting. The profile is that it's an identity server SPA. And if you go to the controllers and OIDC configuration controller, then you're going to see where all of that client stuff comes in. So this controller probably didn't make much sense at the beginning of this course, and I didn't spend too much time explaining what was going on here. But then based on all of the interaction and all of the things that we've done up until this point, and you see how we have to authenticate against the server application or against identity in order to use the client successfully. The token needs to be issued, all of those things. So this controller basically is just pulling those strings. It knows where the client ID, once again, this client, right? It knows all about all of that, and it is basically just facilitating that communication. But once again, a SSL certificate has to be present to facilitate this. Now, in this deployment, we're just deploying a personal application. So the cert is going to be a self-signed cert that we're going to generate on the machine and then use. But in a production setting, then of course you would want to use a production ready and properly issued cert by one of the leading authorities. However, the concepts will remain the same. So let's just get started. So now to get started, what we want to do is bring up PowerShell. We're going to be using this very powerful tool. Once again, if you're on a Windows machine, but it's a very powerful tool, and we're going to be using it to generate our SQL scripts. So you want to bring it up as administrator. All right, so run as administrator. You can either search for it in the search bar, or you can find the icon itself, right click, and then you see run as administrator. So you can use either option to get that done. All right. So the first command, and what we're going to be doing is building some. So if this is the first time you're using PowerShell, at least you get to see kind of how it works. Well, it wouldn't be the first time using PowerShell, because the package manager in Visual Studio is actually using PowerShell commands and commandlets, right? So that kind of format, get dash help or update dash database and add dash migration, all of those are what you call PowerShell commandlets, right? So here we're going to use a commandlet to create a new cert. So this is a variable, right? If you've done PHP, that shouldn't look too unfamiliar to you. And then we're going to say new self, and then you can kind of press tab and it will auto complete the line, right? So new self-signed certificate, DNS name, and then I'm going to call it, let's call it car rental car rental wasm. All right, that's what I'm calling the DNS. So generally speaking, you want that to represent the URL for the website. Once again, this is just us deploying our own app. So the concepts are there, even though the practicality might not necessarily apply in a real life situation. All right. So DNS name, I'll just call it car rental wasm. You can call it something you're more comfortable with. The cert store location, so a kind of default location is cert : and / local machine, which just contextualizes. And if this is all right, let me just enlarge that just in case it's a bit too small. There we go. That looks a bit better. All right. So new self-signed cert, DNS name, car rental wasm, cert / store location, cert local machine, cert : / local machine / and notice the direction of the / my, right? So then it creates it, and then it stores whatever details inside of this variable called cert. All right. Then we need to password protect it. So we're going to say pwd and convert -to, or sorry, convert to -secure string. There we go. -string, and then we'll just give it a string. So I'm just going to use the default password that we know and love. Of course, once again, you'd use a much stronger password in a real life situation. And then we'll say force and as plain text, press enter. So we're storing the password as pwd. Then we're going to build the path. So path is equal to, and then we say cert : and then if I just press L tab, it finishes local machine M tab. So you can just use the tab to kind of speed this along. I'm only going this slowly so you can follow. And then you say cert dot thumbprint. All right. And then we're going to, having built up all of that, export it to a physical file. So I'm going to say export -pfx certificate -cert. All right, cert. And the cert is found at path. And then the file path is where we want it to go, right? So I have a file path at C : /certs / okay, let me just do C : certs. So that's my folder on my machine. So you can go ahead and create your own folder on your own machine, and then you can use that file path. It won't create it for you, so make sure that it exists. But you want to give it the file name. So I can say Blazor wasm cert. Let me just call it that, .pfx. All right, so that's the file that I wanted to generate. And then the password is pwd. All right, go ahead and press enter, and then it will show me that this cert has been created. So for ease, what I'm going to do, and because so there are two reasons I'm going to do it this way. One, for ease, quick win. So we're just going to put it into the project. We know where it is, and we're going to also put in the connection or the details about it in our app settings, in our configurations, so that it can be used. The alternative, however, and probably the way you probably really want to do it in a real life secure setting, would be to, when it is deployed to Azure, upload it to Azure, let Azure manage the certificate, and then set up your configuration to see the certificate as managed by Azure. Now, because I want to keep everything kind of low cost, I won't be spinning up the paid version of Azure that allows all of that to happen. We'll be using the free tier. So because of that, I'm going to keep it simple, but once again, the concept is there. All right. So let us import this certificate into our project. And all I did was go and find it on the file system and copy it and paste it into the project. And here it is. And what we want to do is change the properties to make sure that it copies always. You can say copy if newer, that's fine. All right. So what happens is that we want it when we're deploying that it includes that in the deployment. So now we need to update our configuration so that the identity server knows where to go and find the certificate. That should broker that connection. Once again, this is so that we can get through this activity, but the more secure way to do this would be to let Azure manage the key and then have the configuration point to that managed key. All right, so that way there is no physical key for anybody to be able to access. And of course, this way can be secure if we just lock down the access rights to the server so nobody can really access the physical key file and anything like that. But, it's probably better to just let Azure manage it because Azure would know best. So here we're going to put in some configurations for keys. So inside the identity server configuration object or JSON object, we have clients. And that's where clients end. So under clients, we're going to put a comma and then key. And then we say colon and then open up a new configuration object. And then we're going to specify the type, the store name, the file path, and the path. And that's what that looks like, right? So we have the type, which is file, right? If it was being managed by Azure, type would be different. So we have type, which is file, store name, we just call it my file path, the path to the cert. So I've just put it at the root of the project. I could have put it in a folder, whatever, but wherever I put it, that's the file path. And the password is the password that was used. All right. If anybody accesses this password and can access the file, then obviously, somebody could break it down. But once again, this is a self-signed cert. So the whole idea behind this is not being the most secure, right? And being more secure costs more money. So in this situation, we're just keeping it low cost once again. So after we've done all of that, then we can go ahead and deploy. So I'm going to go right click the server project, click publish, and then in the publish screen, we're going to say start. So from publish, we can always just send everything to a folder, put it on a local server and have IIS run it. We could deploy it to Azure, which is what we're going to be doing. Depending on the situation, you may want to choose one of the above, but once again, we're focusing on Azure right now. So just go to next, and then we want an app service. We'll keep it at Windows, so we won't change that. Next, and then they will confirm your subscription. So at this point, you might be prompted to log in. You can go ahead and do that, but the same account I'm using for Visual Studio is my Microsoft account used on Azure. So they know me, they know which subscription I'm on, and you have pay-as-you-go dev/test where you only pay for what you use and you get the resources at a slightly lower cost, but of course you're not using them for enterprise reasons, right? So that is my subscription that I'm on. I have no resource group. So a resource group is like a container, like a logical container that says all of these resources belong to this app. So you tend to want to have a resource group per app kind of vibe. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and create a new resource group. Well, actually, I'm creating a new app service, which will then suggest a resource group for that app service. So an app service is a managed server. And I keep on saying managed meaning that you don't have to worry about the infrastructure and installing Windows and configuring IIS. You don't have to worry about any of that. Everything is preset. The environment is there. Basically saying, I have the environment, just give me the files and I'll do the rest. So we can give it a name. So I mean, we can probably change this to say like car rental, Blazor, something, whatever the name is that you would like based on what your company wants. Resource group. You can leave that by default, or if you want to create a new one and have a specific name, then you can do that. The hosting plan now is where we need to change it. So I can click new and we can select the location. So based on where I am, East US 2 is my closest data center, but then you see that they cater for quite a few geographical locations. So you want to choose the one that is closest to you to have the most efficient run, right? So after choosing East US 2, I choose which plan I want. And of course, the magic word is at the top, the free one. So I'll go ahead and click OK. And then we can click create and then give that a few minutes. I said minutes, but it really took less than a minute, at least for me. But at the end of this activity, we have the app service created. Then I can just go ahead and click finish. So the resource is there in the cloud. It's sitting down waiting. We haven't deployed as yet. But we have another loose end that we need to tie up, and that is our database, right? So I need to configure the database. Are we using Azure SQL or are we using an on-premises database? Now, the Azure SQL database is another version of managed software. They take care of all of that for you. They're just saying, tell me what you want the database to be called and I'll create it for you. All you have to do is create your tables, read and write, and live merry. You don't have to worry about installing and setting up an environment and all these things. So we'll just use the Azure SQL database. Click next. Now, the database needs a server, as we know, right? To use the database, we have to have a server in place. So we have to actually create this. And then this step is where costing comes in, right? This step isn't necessarily free at all. All right, so database name, I'll just leave it at the default, car rental management.serverdb. The database, well, this is the database, so we need to create the server. So I have to go to new again. So the server is where the cost really comes in, because now you have to pay for that space. And I'm just going to call that DB server. Just a nice generic name. I don't want to be too specific, as it is a server that is going to have many different, that's not available. All right, car rental management WASM. Let's just call that WASM. Of course, is short for WebAssembly. So that it has accepted that one. East US 2. So you want to keep all of your resources in the same geographical region. And I'll just use Trevoir as the username and $$W0RD for the password. $$W0RD. All right. So that's all that's needed to set up a brand new server. See how easy that is? Now, if you were to install Microsoft Server on your machine, it probably would take a little bit more attention than this simple form, the click of an OK button, and then clicking create. And then this one might take a while. And when it's done, we will have our database server and database created and ready for you. So we can just go ahead and hit next. And then they'll ask us to confirm the connection string. So I'll just reuse the same Trevoir and $$$ $$W0RD. Right, so then they give you that connection string value, which you can always just take a peek at, and you can copy it and keep it for your own purposes. But this data source is the address to the server, or well, yeah, to the database server, right? And that's the name of the database. We know about connection strings already, but you could actually just open up, SQL Server Management Studio, put in this value, and then authenticate and then connect. And the good thing is that it's automatically secured. So Azure has it has blacklisted everything. There's nothing allowed. So if you try to connect from your machine, it will say, well, I see your IP address. Please authenticate and then indicate that you want to be whitelisted. So that way, unauthorized access is cut down significantly because of that default security policy on your database. I'm just trying to show you how cool Azure is when it comes to keeping things safe. And then they ask, where do you want to store your connection value? I'll just leave it in app settings. Key Vault is a paid service, if I'm not mistaken. Azure app settings, that comes complimentary, right? Of course, you have one that works and then one that is very secure, more secure. So we'll just stick with the one that works anyway. All right, so let's go ahead and click next, and then they will suggest that we need to deploy some dependencies and set up a secret store. So we can hit finish, allow that to do its thing. And then when it's done, our publish page now has no warnings. Everything is good. But I want to make one modification before I hit publish, and that is to the actions on publish. So I'm going to hit edit, and then it brings up this new dialog box that we didn't see before. But I'm going to go down to settings, and then it's going to discover the databases and data contexts. So what happens is that at this point, it will create the database, but there will be no tables and no data according to our seeded data and so on, right? So I'm going to go ahead and let it know that I wanted to apply this migration on publish, and we can choose to use this connection string at runtime, right? So I'm just going to tick those two. The other settings, don't really tinker around with them. We can choose to install this site extension. I'm not sure if that's a paid service, to be honest. And then we can choose that every time we publish, we want to, clean out the folder and republish. We probably don't need to do that one. But I'm going to leave all of these ticked and then go ahead and save. And then the moment that we have worked assiduously for, let us hit publish. And when all of that is done, we are getting this 500 error. All right, at least there's progress. So what I'm going to do is sign into the portal. So this is my portal. This is what it looks like. You can customize this, so don't mind how boring my dashboard looks. I don't really have that many resources anyway, but I'm just going to go straight to the app service, and from there, I'm going to use the side menu. So you can, if you have this, you're able to look at it. You can take some time and appreciate that you're getting different metrics, data in, data out. They're letting you know how often you hit a 500 error. So you see, we just hit one. It's a very useful dashboard. You can restart, you can stop, you can delete it, a number of things, right? So what I want to do though is get to some advanced tools. So under development tools, go down to advanced tools. We can click go, and then this will bring us to a dashboard that allows us to go into the actual file system, right? So I can go to debug console, CMD, and then here I can actually view the files that were uploaded. I can go to sites, www.root, and then these are the files that were published. All right. So you see everything is right there. All right. So I want to know why this is failing. I want to see logs. So I'm going to modify the web.config, which is at the very bottom of this list. and then I'm going to tell it std log enable is true, save, and then I'm just going to try and browse to the website again. So sorry, I have some searches open from another activity, so let's just refresh. And when that refresh is done, that means it would have generated a new log. So I'm going to go back, and the log destination is this log files, and there's our log std out . If I look at it, it says there was an error loading the certificate. The file c home site www Blazor wasn't cert was not found. So that is why. So just to drive the point home that we need to have this certificate running, because you would have seen another error if the cert wasn't present, and now that we told it the cert is present, it can't find it, we're still getting an error, right? So the cert is absolutely vital. Now what I need to do is look back and see why it cannot find that cert. So I did say, all right, so I'm going to say copy always instead, right? So let's change that to copy always, and then I'm going to do a fresh publish. And when it finishes that publish that time, boom, there we go. So we have published our Blazor WebAssembly app to the internet. There's our URL, wasn't.azurewebsites.net. Of course, you can buy your custom domain and have it, set up properly. But let's try to log, and we're in. All right. Here's we need to fix that style, but styling aside, we can always fix that later on. But here we are on the internet. So we have our makes, we have our models, everything that we had seeded into the database when we started off is there. And then we can go ahead and do our work as we wish. All right. So we have successfully deployed our application to the internet courtesy of Microsoft Azure. And you see, it didn't take an hour, right? That's how easy it is to deploy an application to the internet using Microsoft Azure. So guys, that's it for this activity. Thanks for joining me.